Atlanta, Georgia, waiting for the author to start. Jack the Raper.
Well,
The Rapper. Jack the Rapper.
all right. Well, I'm here to talk about Jack the Rapper. He was an Atlanta institution, and he opened the first black-owned radio station in the United States, and it was right here in Atlanta, and that was in 1949. That was WERD. And this is the book, Mellow Yellow. And I wrote this. I spent 2 years working with Jack on this book to write the story of his life. And it just came out this year. And it's all about the music industry, radio, early radio, black radio, all the struggles, how they managed to do all these things during segregated times. It was rough, but they managed to achieve amazing things. And it's also got a lot of fun stories in it. He knew so many people. He had timing. His timing was what amazed me. After the whole radio stint, when he was doing all this radio, he also then moved on to Motown, and he was instrumental in a lot of the big stars that everybody's heard of. Let's see, like Stevie Wonder and the Supremes. He was directly involved with them. Jill, you remember him being around for all of them, promoting all those records. Then he moved on to Revelot, and he was instrumental in the career of Jackie Wilson and a lot of other people. Then he moved on to Stax, and so then he was involved with Isaac Hayes and the Staple Singers, and he just always had the timing of being at the right place at the right time. And so he had friends that were so famous, it was amazing. He was, among his friends, I mean, he would tell me stories about Nat King Cole, Thurgood Marshall, Nancy Wilson, all these people. It was great. He was also an MC on a lot of these swing dances and music shows. And, oh my God, Errol Garner, just everybody. And so when he finally started doing the Family Affair, which was a huge music convention in the 90s, this was something that the labels all insisted that all their acts go and attend every year. And this was, I'm not talking about Capitol and Sony and all the major labels sent their acts to be seen at this thing. This was a major record company event every year. Some of the best concerts I went to them, and they were amazing. You'd see Prince, Michael Jackson, Stevie Wonder, I mean, everybody was there. So he also would bring in people like Nancy Wilson and some of the old timers, Billy Eckstine, all these people from the 40s and the 50s, so that the newer crop of people could relate to the older people who paved the way for them. And he always wanted people to be remembered. There was something that he did for Jackie Wilson when he found out that Jackie Wilson had died and was buried in an unmarked grave. This was a very big star in his time. And Higher and Higher, all these big songs he had. And when he died penniless. Nobody knew where he was buried. So Jack took up a collection, made sure that he had a beautiful crypt built for him and his mother, who was also buried in an unmarked grave. He couldn't stand the idea that they were in an unmarked grave. So he built this big crypt for them. It was always just a big thing for him to remember the people who went before and to appreciate them, make sure that the young people knew them and appreciated what they did for them, because they opened doors that these kids just took for granted that were open. When they got there, they were already open, but somebody had to open it. So that was big for him, and so that's why I'm going around talking about this man, because I don't want him to be forgotten. And Jack the Rapper Gibson was a big man in the industry. The things he did for radio disc jockeys, for anybody in the entertainment, black entertainment, it was just amazing what he accomplished. And so I'm trying to tell the world about it. And this book is doing very well. We're getting a lot of sales online, and Barnes & Noble has it online and here at the store for sale. And that's his daughter Jill back there, who was there for a lot of those early days when he was still working at the radio stations. She knew all those people at her parties, at her wedding. Tell me who was at your wedding, Jill.
I don't remember.
No, come on now. You
No,
had.
I don't. No, I don't think about it.
You don't? Oh my goodness. Wow. Okay. I heard that everybody there was a lot of stars at your wedding. Anyway, so he was just an important man to remember and appreciate. And so I hope that everybody reads the book and talks about him and Googles him, get some interest on him online. And, an excerpt from the book.
What was his Atlanta connection? He lived here?
Yes, the Family Affair, the big music convention that he did every year, was here in Atlanta. Almost all of them were here in Atlanta. And they were huge. I mean, all the stars descended on Atlanta, right? Am I right? They
Well,
were all
what years were you talking about? What
The
years did
90s, when
No,
80s
in the
and
70s.
into the 90s. But it didn't overlap to the 70s, 80s, and into the early 90s.
Yes.
Yes.
Stop.
Was he from the South? Or
That first radio station that he opened was
Or was
here.
he was from here?
Born in
Chicago.
Chicago, that's right, Chicago. But he was a DJ, so he was working at all these different radio stations. But the one in Atlanta was the first black-owned radio station in the United States, very first one. And he was a DJ and part owner, and so that was a big major thing. And so that was WERD. And what was real interesting was that it was on the floor above Dr. King's office. He was here on Auburn Avenue, the SCLC offices, and Martin Luther King was down there doing the civil rights movement business, and here was Jack and the radio station above them. So they would, when Dr. King was in town, he would say, well, let's let Dr. King say something to our audiences. So he didn't have time to run up and down stairs to go do, so he would drop the microphone out the window, lower it down by the wire, and he would speak through the window and talk to the audience. Martin Luther King. So I mean, all this history that he was involved in also. So it was, the stories he tells in his book are amazing. There are a lot of very funny stories, and a lot of heartbreaking stories, and just a lot of hopeful stories. He knew everybody. I mean, this is at the front. We have this quotation from James Brown, who says, "I never forgot where I came from and who put me on top, God and Jack the Rapper." So I mean, when you're just second billing to God, that's pretty good, I think. So he was a big man. He helped a lot of people. He was behind the scenes.
How did you connect with him with the story?
I actually used to be in the music business, and someone told me that he was trying to. I was in the music business earlier, and then I went ahead and went back to my first love, which was writing, and I had given all that up. But a friend knew that I knew about the music business, and I was also a writer, so they introduced me, and he tried me. He had been trying a couple of people out, and he wasn't real happy. So I submitted a sample chapter to him of after I interviewed him, and he liked it. And so it was when we were on, and for 2 years, every Sunday we talked. He told me all his stories. I put them all in the book and put them all together and fashioned it into it followed the course of his life, and it's just amazing. I mean, I loved him, and when he passed, I was just devastated. I was a lot more devastated than I thought I would be, because we had become such good friends, and he told me, he used to call me, he was Catholic, and he used to call me Father Walker all the time. You know, I'm not a man, but he called me Father Walker because he used to say, because talking to you is like going to confession. And so he told me a lot of stuff, a lot of his feelings for his wife. And his wife, Sadie, who was so instrumental, she helped him so much in all of the family affairs. Jill was involved in the family affairs stuff. It was really, the family affair was a family affair. It wasn't just a music business family affair. It was a Gibson family affair. They had no money when they started. It was amazing the things that you can do when you just get a good idea and you just decide you're not going to be defeated. And that's the thing about this man. During segregation, they started opening that radio station. I mean, it was like, how did they do that? They just decided they were going to do it. When he put out his first newsletter, this was an industry newsletter, they called it the Mellow Yellow, because they were so broke that all they had to work with was the cheapest paper they could buy was goldenrod, and this legal size goldenrod paper, and they would just type it up on there and make copies of it and pass it out to all of the record labels and radio guys. And so it became this Bible. Everybody looked to that tip sheet to find out who the hot records were going to be, and so that's why we titled the book LPL, because that was a very important newsletter that he put out. And he just kept. You talk about somebody pulling themselves up by bootstraps. He did it. I mean, and he didn't have much, and he's a good example of what people would do when they just decide they're not going to be defeated. And so.
He was black?
I beg your pardon?
He was black?
Absolutely. He's very light, and that's what they call yellow. So he said that's another reason he liked it, because he said, well, everybody calls me yellow, so I'll call the papers Mellow Yellow. And so there was a good story he told about bailing Sammy Davis Jr. out of jail once. That was interesting. Very funny story. Because back in Florida, I think it was, back in the 50s, you had to have some kind of a pass when you worked out there in a cabaret. And Sammy Davis Jr. didn't have his pass that night, and he was out walking around the streets or whatever after his show, and they picked him up. He didn't have his pass. Imagine that. In the 50s, you still had to have a pass if you were black and were walking the streets at night. So they took him in, they put him in jail, and Jack and Nat King Cole and Dinah Washington went to pick him up at the police station, and they decided that Jack should go in and get him, because Jack went in and they didn't know who he was, and maybe he could pass for white and pretend to
buried in Atlanta?
I beg your pardon?
Is he buried in Atlanta?
I think he's buried in.
No, it's Orlando, Florida.
In Orlando, Florida. That was his last place where he also did some of the conventions there, but mostly Atlanta was his town. He had the first radio station, WDRD, in 1949, and he came back again and did another radio show for several years here. So he was here for quite some time doing radio, and then he decided to do the convention here. So that brought a lot of business to the city and a lot of superstars coming down here to Atlanta to be a part of that every year. It was a big deal. I remember those. They were huge and they were fun. They were a 3-day event, big hotel full, top to bottom, nothing but record labels and superstars. If you got to be a part of that and be involved, you were lucky. People still talk about it. Tom Joyner, everybody was there. All the big, all the people he mentored were there. So, anybody got any questions?
Read some out of your book.
Big part?
Read from your book.
Read from my book? All right, well.
What were your favorite stories?
That might interest you. Let's see. Well, you talked about Atlanta. Well, let's see. He went back, he says, I went back on the air at WURD in Atlanta on the 4th of July in 1954. He said, the people just took to him. He said, I was as hot as a firecracker and I took that town over for the next 4 years. He was big in Atlanta. He says, our format was wide open. We played all kinds of music, rhythm and blues, swing, easy listening, standard blues, and bebop. Sam Cooke, Big Joe Turner, Ruth Brown, the Midnighters, Brooke Benton, Dinah Washington. Modern jazz was beginning to catch on, and from its home base on 52nd Street in New York, it was spreading across the country like some kind of out-of-control wildfire. So I decided it was time to dedicate a show strictly to jazz. So he did a jazz show, and he had people on there such as Lester Young, Stan Kenton, Duke Ellington, Dizzy Gillespie, Charles Harper, Sonny Stitt, John Coltrane, Ella Fitzgerald. He knew all these people. It was wonderful. And then he did his side job as MC. Oh, there's a story. There's a story in here about, this was when he was in Louisville, right? There was a little boy, he used to MC these shows, and a little boy used to come out. Let me see if I can find it. Here it is. This is a good story. All right. He would MC these shows, dances. And he said, so he was in Louisville, it was Shelby, just outside of Louisville. Okay. He said, it didn't take us long to set things up, and we had regular dances and shows. So we talk it up and line up our radio program, and we pull big crowds every night. One night I pulled up in my old car and started unpacking the boxes of records I planned to play, when a skinny boy who looked to be about 12 or 13 walked up. He just smiled at me until I finally said, hi. You Jockey Jack, huh? They used to call him Jockey Jack. The kid said, obviously excited to meet me. I sure am. And Jockey Jack is fixing to light it up in there, Junior, big dance. He says, I know, I heard you talking about it on your show. Can I help you? Can you let me carry those records in for you? So he said, so now I knew the kid was trying to win me over so I could let him into the dance free of charge, but I didn't mind. At least he was willing to work for the favor. Sure, kid, come on in and have yourself some fun. So he takes the records in, hauls them in. He goes and dances and has the time of his life. After that first time, he was there like clockwork. Every time we had a dance talking about, that those records are heavy, huh? I'll help you carry them, Jackie Jack. Well, by this time, I developed a fondness for the kid. After all, he was a devoted listener, and I really didn't feel like hauling those records myself anyway. Well, those dances got pretty wild sometimes. So he goes on and talks about the dances. Then, says many years later, I was scheduled to do an interview with Muhammad Ali. I'd always been a fan of his, and I was pretty excited about meeting the champ. Well, I was in for a surprise. When I went in for the interview and shook his hand, Ali was grinning at me like we were old friends. You don't remember me, do you? Ali said with an amused expression. That was the last thing I expected the champ to say. Well, I mumbled as I racked my brain trying to remember when and where I had met the heavyweight champion of the world. All I knew was he was the greatest of all time. Jockey Jack, he said, all those times I carried your records into those dances, and I don't even remember them. And that was Muhammad Ali. I love that. It's a million stories like this in there. It's really a fun, hopeful book, but it's just Frank Sinatra. He talks about having there was a racial event. There was some kind of a big blow up in a high school, and so they decided in this area to have some people go to talk to the students to try to calm things down because there was a lot of racial problems in the 50s. So they hooked up a lot of white stars with black stars and had him go and talk to the kids. And he was partnered with Frank Sinatra, so they got to go. He just knew everybody. It was amazing. And I mean, you go through this book, and any page you just can flip to any page, and you'll see. Really? I mean, it's a fun book. It's really a lot of fun, but it's all true. And he also, I mean, he lived through so much history. You know, the every place was burning. I mean, I don't know if you guys read about that because that was a time before your time, but the streets were burning, a lot of neighborhoods were burning, everybody was angry. He wanted to go out and go do man on the street interviews in the middle of all this fire. He was in Detroit. Detroit was one of the worst cities that burned, and he was down there right in the middle of all that craziness, with a microphone, doing a remote to try to put it on the radio and let people see what was really going on, and not just show the anger of the people, but ask them why were they doing it, and just trying to get that take on it. So he lived through all this history, and he was born in 1920. So if he was alive today, he'd be 95 years old. It's hard for me to get my brain around that. And but he remembered everything. It was great working with him. And for 2 years we worked, and got a good story. I mean, it's a good life story, and I just want the world to know about this guy. So, any other questions? I was just hoping we'd have more people here, but the books will be here.
How did he get started in the DJ? Was he in the musical side first,
Yes,
and then DJ, or
he started that in college. He was in college, and they had one of those little college radio stations, and so he used to go and he had an idea about being what was it, like you call it, a gossip guy on the radio. So he'd go on the radio, and he would talk about certain students that were fooling around on their girlfriends, or I mean, he just had a silly show going on, but they play good music. So they started talking about some of the professors, and they got in trouble, and they kicked him off the air. And so, but he knew he really enjoyed being a DJ. So that got him started. And he was also on WGN in Chicago, which is a radio station, still radio station and television station in Chicago. And he was an actor, so he did radio dramas. And so there was a black soap opera way back in it must have been early 30s or late 30s or early 40s. And so he was an actor on the radio. So he knew radio was for him. And so he just worked these jobs and managed to get in on these radio stations. But the WERD was the first big one. That was the first black-owned radio station in the United States, and that was important. That's history. That's right here in Atlanta. So that was big.
So was he the go-to guy if anyone had a new record?
Oh yes.
So
Yes. In fact, he tells a story. Things were different back then. Like now, Clear Channel, and you ever listen to Clear Channel, and they'll play like the same 10 records, and you tune in next week and they're still playing the same 10 records. Back then, the DJ had a lot more control over things. The DJs could play what they wanted to play, and you could call in and actually speak to the DJ and request a record, and they play it for you. That's how easy it was back then. So one guy, I can't remember what record it was, but he said there was a record that some guy brought to him, and he really, really liked it a lot. So he decided to just play it all day long. And he played the same record over and over again all day long. And he said everybody was annoyed and everybody was mad at him, and the radio station was mad and everybody was upset with him. But the record became a hit. Everybody came out and saw the guy when he came to town. He talks about Ray Charles. Ray Charles wanted Jack to manage him back before he was nobody. Ray Charles was just trying to promote his own records, and he came to Jack and heard him on the radio and said, I want you to play my records. He said, yeah, if I like it, I'll play it. And he was saying, I also want you to manage me because you're always making people's records become hits, and so you need to manage me. And he said, well, I'm not a manager. And so this was early on. And then Ray Charles blew up and got big, and then when they got older, every time they saw each other, he'd say, yeah. And Ray Charles was like, you look a rock. And Ray Charles was saying, bet you wish you would have managed me now. You'd have had a lot more money. So the stories about like that are just all through the book. It was such a joy for me. And I'll go and I'll talk, and I don't care if there's 50 people here, or there's 4 people, or 2 people, or 1 person. I'm going to still talk about the man because I want people to, even if you go tell 1 or 2 people, I want people to remember this man because he wanted other people to be remembered, and I don't want him to be forgotten.
I noticed in the pictures he's got some hip hop artists, so he was able to make that jump from that
That's like
jazz, big band, R&B.
That's what I'm saying. He went from all the way from early jazz, all from the 20s, 30s, 40s, all the way to that's LL Cool J right there.
Early on.
And there's Berry Gordy, and I don't know if you see that. I've got some of the stuff anyway. That's Nancy Wilson here, and then you got Reverend Al, you got Jesse Jackson, you got that's James Brown. Hello. And I mean, I'm trying to remember some of the people. Who else would have that? He had Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. He had so many people that came to those family affairs that performed. I mean, these were like they were not concert. You couldn't pay enough to get these concerts together. They were just the superstars. Janet Jackson, Prince. Oh, Prince tore it up when Prince was there, and that was when he was at the height. So, and all these people would clear their schedules. Anything for the old man, they would come out and do that.
example of that was the Bronner brothers. They had the Rudy brothers. They started having their show
Oh, okay.
on the tail end
Of the Jack the Rapper convention.
Jack the Rapper, and it made them
Oh, okay.
the millionaires that they are today.
Yeah, I mean, he helped a lot of people, and just trying to think of all the stories. There's so many of them, but they're all in the book. And he was something else. He was really, he was an amazing man, and I'm proud to have known him. I know when I got the call that he had passed away, he had cancer while we were working on the book, and but he was being treated, and he was back on the air. That was what I loved best. He had kind of hit skids, and people were not. He was upset because a lot of people he had helped were kind of not calling him back at that time as he was getting older, and the convention was no longer. What happened with the convention was that when rap started coming into the forefront, a lot of the backers and people who were involved in it did not want that element to come to the. If they wanted to just keep it in the music and R&B and all that kind of stuff, and jazz and whatnot. But he said, well, if that's the direction that the music is going, we have to honor that. I mean, we have to have that be a part of it because that's music. We can't segregate the music. So he stuck up for the rappers, and then what happened was, just one or two of the wrong people come, and there was a shooting at one of the conventions. This was at the very end, and so there was a shooting, and nobody got hurt. Somebody falsely reported that somebody got killed, but nobody got killed. But it's in the the room where they're having the big banquet. You don't want to be having shots fired while you're trying to have your banquet. So the next year, nobody wanted to come, and then little by little, it just it was over. So it was kind of ironic that the very people who he stuck up for were the ones who messed it up for him. But it wasn't all of them. It was just that those couple of people. So it was tragic. But anyway, then he went back on the air, and he was like 76, I think, and he went back on the air in Las Vegas. He was on a radio station in Las Vegas, and he was so happy. And you hear him on the air, he sounds like he's 35. He was just so energetic, and he was being treated for cancer. He was doing great. So when I got the call that he did get to read the book, the whole final of the book before he passed away, when we were working on getting it published. Then all of a sudden, I get the call from his wife that he had passed away, and I was just floored. I was really shocked because I just didn't. I thought he was doing so much better. So that was very sad, and I still miss him. I still can hear his voice in my head. I've got a million tapes, so sometimes I'll play a couple of them and listen to him talk and laugh, and he was just a wonderful person. He'd make you smile. He could light up a room, and with the convention, it'd be like hundreds of people in one room, and he would go and speak to everybody and make everybody smile. I mean, he was just that kind of a man, and he made the world a better place. He really, really did, especially in the music industry. He did a lot for the music industry, and a lot of singers, a lot of DJs. He really, really was a great man. And so I just want people to remember him.
Take a few minute break.
Mhm.
Take a break.
Take a break? Okay. Well, I don't know if anybody else is coming, so I don't know. Unless you guys have more questions, Yes? What did you want me to do? Oh, you just. Oh, I don't know if there's anything more to say. But now you know about somebody you might not have known before. Okay.
Yes. And there you go, Jack the Rapper. His book, buy it now. It's on Barnes & Noble. It's online. It's in the local store. You're able to check it out. We got an insight of a American institution. So check it out. Thanks for watching.
John.